The fascination of flying. What do we think about when we think about flying? What does flying mean to us? And how does the imagination evolve when we think about flying? For many of us, including myself, the fascination started at a very, very young age. On a Sunday afternoon with my parents, going to the local airport where I lived, to be able to look in awe at what was happening in this fantastic, fascinating space, holding with the hands through the airport fence in complete awe of what was going on behind the fence, seeing large aircraft taking off into the sky. How is this possible, I thought? How are we able to do this? How is there able to be so many people inside? How does it get airborne? How does it get into the air? The fascination with flying evolves as we do when we grow up. And aviation was always a fascination for me ever since the very, very early days of visiting the airport. And you start to learn and understand more, and you see that there's a culture and there's a lifestyle with aviation. And this culture gives you an impression of the world which is global. You can see here an image of a well-known German airline, Lufthansa. Very smart, wearing uniforms. It's a lifestyle, not knowing from one month to the next where you will be flying to. Will you be flying short haul, so small sectors? Will you be flying longer haul? And each month you receive your so-called roster, and you don't know where you're going to fly. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that exciting? For some of us, we like routine. If you want to work in aviation, that's certainly not the case. For many of us, flying changed, particularly in Europe in the early 1990s, with the introduction of low-cost carriers. So airlines flying, able to offer tickets at a lot lower cost. We talk about fascination. For many of you listening to this today, you may well think that this is more fear than fascination, because the way in which we fly changed during that time. Prior to low-cost carriers, we were very, very much in an exclusive environment. Flying was exclusivity. Flying was a luxury. Whether it was for business travel, whether it was for private travel, flying was definitely a luxury. In the early 1990s in Europe, the introduction of airlines such as Ryanair and EasyJet enabled a lot more people to travel point to point at a lot lower cost, which began to bring the world to a so-called smaller place. And what does this mean? What do we mean when we see a smaller world? More frequent connections, the possibility to be able to fly longer distances from point to point. We saw this with the involvement of the so-called Gulf carriers, so the three main airlines operating out of the Gulf. You are able to fly from Australia to the UK with stopping just once, something which was never possible before. So flying has certainly evolved, and the possibilities with flying have certainly grown. Low-cost flying serves its purpose as well, and certainly was great competition for the traditional legacy airlines of this world. And what happened, you see here, from the luxury of let's call it the former times of flying, into perhaps what is today's world of crowded aeroplanes, although perhaps not so crowded at the moment with the pandemic which we currently face ourselves in. I think it's been well documented how the pandemic has affected the passenger side of aviation. When we talk about cargo, that's also included within aviation, of course, and cargo has enabled the world's supply chain during the pandemic to keep going and supporting the world supply chain, and that's something within the aviation environment which is very, very important. But you can see how things have developed. The exclusivity is still there, but for this you pay a premium to be exclusive when flying. Flying is a very thrilling and fascinating experience, at least from my own personal perspective. Having the possibility to walk into an airport and know that I'm flying somewhere, whether that's domestically, so within the same country, whether that's to another country, a neighboring country from where I'm based here in Germany. Or even better, the fascination and the excitement gets higher when I'm going to be flying a long distance. And there are various elements included, whether it's the airline that you're flying on, the routing in which you're going to take, the aircraft type which you're going to take. This is things which still today I find absolutely fascinating within the world of aviation. Even in the year of the pandemic, I've had the pleasure to fly this year in 2021 over 50 times. And yes, traveling today has changed. And yes, it is perhaps not what it was pre-pandemic, but there is still that element of fascination. There is still that element of walking into the airport with your suitcase, knowing that you're going to be flying somewhere. The smell, the atmosphere, the process is a fantastic experience. Aeroplanes in the sky. Environment. When we talk about environment, this is so present in today's world. And the environment is so important within our daily lives, not just within aviation. There are certain industries that do have a larger impact than others on the environment, and aviation is certainly one of those. So how can we make aviation more sustainable? Perhaps with fuel. So the fuel which is provided to the aircraft to fly the aircraft from its origin to its destination. Can we become more sustainable with that? When we think about the use of plastic in the passenger cabin, is this something that we can transform to more biodegradable products? The environment is so important, and it's so present, as I said, in our daily lives, and aviation is working extremely hard to be as environmentally sustainable as possible. And this is one of the main agendas of the global airlines that we see today, and something that will certainly remain. So the fascination of flying, the ability to fly long distance, short distance, being above the clouds, seeing the sunshine every day, it's a luxury, it's a great experience. If we then consider the introduction of water within this scenario, what are the images that perhaps we then create? You think, okay, flying and water, are they actually a match? So how does the imagination change when you see an aircraft which is able to land and take off on water? For some of us, that's perhaps a new concept, because we're used to the traditional and very common method of international airports offering a tarmac for the aircraft to land and take off. But here you see an image of an aircraft that is able to land and take off on water. So how does your imagination change? How does the experience change? Does it become more fascinating? Does it become more exclusive? For me, it does. And I had the opportunity earlier this year to become one of the founding members of a seaplane airline based in Italy. And our operation will start in the year of 2023. The company was founded this year, and we're currently working towards the possibility of operating an airline, operating aircraft within Italy during the summer. Of course, we are in the Northern Hemisphere. Weather has to be considered whenever we fly. So during the summer months, we will be flying from Rome International Airport to the southern islands in the South Mediterranean Tyrrhenian Sea. When I heard about the project, the level of fascination just evolved. Flying, water, Italy, summer, sunshine, vacation, exclusivity, all of these things came to mind. Global seaplane operations today are not that present. So within Europe especially, we have some operations within Greece and Spain, which are currently in the planning. There are some operations already taking place. The Maldives and Canada, for those of you that have had the opportunity to travel to these locations, there are significant numbers of seaplane aircrafts flying in these destinations. And if you think about the Maldives, you perhaps understand a little bit more about the fascination and the imagination. The blue lagooned waters, the sun is shining, you arrive at the international airport, and you reach your so-called island or atoll where your hotel is by seaplane. What a nice experience to have at the end of a long flight, to know that you'll be reaching your hotel by seaplane. Doesn't that sound nice? When we talk then about the environment and seaplanes, this is also a very, very important point, and something which our company in Italy is extremely conscious of, and is definitely one of our main agenda points. The impact of seaplanes on the environment is very, very minimal. As we will see from this picture, all of the engine, propulsion, propeller systems are outside of the water. Okay? So the only part which is actually in the water, as you can see here, is the float. You have some rudders on the back which help to move the aircraft when it's on water, but all of the engine, the fuel systems are all outside of the water. The aircraft is able to land and take off on a very short space of water with a low impact onto the water, therefore having a very, very reduced impact on the marine life. The infrastructure that's required at a so-called seaport, not an airport, a seaport, we need a place where the passengers can get off the aircraft and they can get onto the aircraft. So we have to create a so-called structure on the seaport which is floating. What we see, marine life makes their homes in these structures. They're not permanent structures, we can remove them as well. So the impact is a lot less than perhaps a boat, for example, that's using a huge amount of weight, a huge amount of diesel, and therefore creating a huge amount of pollution. So we firmly believe that it's an environmentally friendly approach, and something which we will certainly be taking care of as we develop our airline and develop our operation. So when we bring all of these factors together, and when we look at aviation and we look at flying, and we have the combination with water and all of the elements that I've mentioned, perhaps I'll just leave you with a lasting image, which looks to be quite idyllic, right? It looks like you're in paradise. So with the love of aviation, with the fascination of aviation, with the possibilities of aviation, I think it's a great, great thing. And I would encourage anybody to get deeper into the fascination of flying. Thank you.